Hi, I'm Michelle and today I'm going to show you how to make pizzelles. Pizzelles are a traditional Italian wafer cookie. You might have seen them or something that looks similar to them when you've had a cannoli. It looks a little bit like the cannoli shell, except when you make a pizzelle for a cookie, it is flat. My family eats these at Christmas and Easter traditionally, and I'm going to show you today how we make ours. There's lots of different variations, so this is just our family's recipe. Before we start, I'm going to go over what we need. Our ingredients are going to be flour, all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, some baking powder, salt. You need 1 pound of butter. I'm using unsalted butter, but I will post a variation of the recipe that can be made with salted butter if that's what you prefer to use. Anise extract, anise seed, vanilla, and you're going to need a full dozen eggs to make this recipe. This recipe does make a lot of pizzelles, so feel free to half or quarter it as you need. In order to do this, you really need a big chunk of time. It is a time-consuming recipe to complete, so plan accordingly when you decide you're going to make them. It's not something that you can at 5 o'clock say, oh, I want pizzelles for dessert at 7:30. You're just not going to have enough time. So what we're also going to need is a big mixer. It doesn't have to be a stand mixer. If you only have a handheld, that will work. I'm going to use our paddle attachment today. But again, if you just have a little hand mixer with the whisks, that'll work just fine. We're going to use a sifter at the end to put powdered sugar over the top of our pizzelles. I also have a separate dish to crack my eggs, a little kitchen timer. Again, you can use an electric timer like I have, or even if you have one of those timers that you flip over, an egg timer, or from a game, those work too, until you really get used to making the pizzelles and have an idea of how long it takes for them to get done in the press. The timer really helps you so that they all come out evenly. Another tool we're going to need, which is specific for making pizzelles, is a pizzelle press. This is mine. This was just a very cheap version, very basic version. You can go online and buy very fancy ones. My mom has hers that she bought online from Italy, and they're about twice the size of this, and cast iron. My mom runs 2 presses at once when she makes these. I just use one. So a lot of people say, oh, maybe I can use a waffle press to make pizzelles. Well, unfortunately you can't, because when you look inside, you'll see the tray part of a pizzelle maker is one round. It's also smaller than a waffle, and it's shallow. So these come out very thin. The cookies are not thick like a waffle. So that's why you need the special press with the actual pizzelle plates inside. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. I also have here a 1 cup measure, a large spatula, a small scraper, my teaspoon measure, and then I have a couple of different scoops that I'll use to scoop the batter into my press once the batter is made. A little bit further over here, I have set up the drying station. So again, you want to make sure you have a lot of space before you get started. If you plan out accordingly, you shouldn't have a problem. But this recipe does require you to have room to work. So I have just a plain half sheet tray with a cookie rack on the top. When the pizzelles first come out of the press, they're going to need to dry. And then I just have 2 other sheet pans set up here, so as the pizzelles have dried on the rack, Linda and I can move them over here to the side and let them sit while we finish the recipe. One thing you want to watch out for too when you're setting up is make sure that you set up near a wall outlet, because you are going to need power for your mixer and for your press. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this out of the way, and then we're going to get started making our batter. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and start mixing up our batter here, and the first step is to cream together a pound of butter. This is unsalted butter. A pound is 4 sticks. You can use salted butter. If you use salted butter, omit a teaspoon of salt in the recipe that I'm going to use, but since I'm using unsalted butter today, I am going to use a teaspoon of salt just to make sure that it has the right flavor. So we're going to mix the pound of butter with 3 cups of granulated sugar, and you want to beat that in your mixer until it's nice and fluffy. So our butter is almost completely creamed with our sugar. I'm just going to go ahead and, like I said, add my salt because I used unsalted butter. So the general rule of thumb is per stick of butter, you want a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I have 4 sticks of unsalted butter. That means 1 teaspoon of salt has to go in. And I'm just going to crank this up again to high, make sure that that's fully incorporated into our butter and sugar. so I've just cracked my dozen eggs, and what we're going to do is we're going to add our eggs one at a time into our sugar and butter mixture. And we're going to do that on low speed until all the eggs are in, and then we'll go ahead and add some of our seasonings. So again, I mean, if two fall in, it's not that big of a deal. You just want to add them slowly. Don't just dump them all in at once. That'll result in a big mess. You know, at this stage of the game, this batter is going to, obviously, we just added a dozen eggs to it. It's going to be very liquidy. And it will get a little bit thicker as we continue making it. But all in all, it is a very soft batter. You're not looking for a cookie dough consistency here. It's going to be very runny compared to a cookie type of dough. So all our eggs are in. Let's go ahead and crank up the speed of our mixer and make sure that everything's incorporated. Go ahead and scrape down the sides of your bowl. Make sure that all that butter and sugar gets in the egg. Okay, so our eggs are all incorporated. Everything is nice and fluffy. You don't really need to mix it completely all the way right now because we're going to add our flavor. Okay, so we're going to add our anise extract, and for this recipe we're going to use half a bottle. I'm just going to switch our mixer onto low while we incorporate this. And this is 1 fluid ounce, and I, again, will use half of this for this recipe. So just when you're cutting the recipe down, cut this down obviously accordingly. Also are going to use 1/3 of an ounce bottle of anise seeds. These give it a little bit of a texture. Different areas in Italy and different families often add different flavors to their pizzelle. Here you could substitute at your discretion. You can use slivered almonds, crushed walnut, whatever you think would taste good. I've even seen some people make it with chocolate chips in it. So, if you want to use our recipe, it's anise, but you can be creative there. And we're also going to add a healthy dollop of vanilla. I don't measure that. Add how much vanilla you like. We like a lot, so I put probably, I would estimate, about a tablespoon, maybe more when I make them. And then you're going to just crank this up to high and let that really get nicely blended until it's creamy and smooth. Okay, so what I've done now is I've measured out 5 even leveled cups of flour. And I'm just going to put this into a separate bowl so that I can mix it with our 4 teaspoons of baking powder, and then we're going to add it all together into our wet mixture. Okay, so you want 4 leveled teaspoons of baking powder. Right into your flour, and then just give it a good stir, make sure it's all incorporated. Okay, our egg mixture is nice and fluffy, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our flour mixture just a little bit at a time. You don't have to measure out how much you put in at once. Sometimes I will use a spoon to try to minimize the amount of mess I make while I do this, but you just want to add it and incorporate it until the mixture is nice and smooth. Now, I mean, if you guys could smell this, this has the greatest anise and vanilla smell, ever. I smell this and it just brings me right back to my mom's kitchen growing up, making pizzelles with my sisters and my mom, and it's like instant happiness to smell this mixture, and it, of course, tastes absolutely delicious too. And this does take a few minutes to get incorporated. We are mixing quite a bit of flour in here. And as you can see, our dough is starting to get a little thicker. but for the most part it's going to stay relatively moist. And you definitely want to keep your mixer on the lowest setting while you do this, otherwise you're just going to have flour all over your kitchen. And if you are going to use a hand mixer, what I like to do when doing it that way is, stop the mixer, take it out, add a little bit of flour. Take your time. There's no need to rush. So all our has been incorporated, and we're just going to let that mix up for about a minute. Make sure that it's completely incorporated, and then we'll scrape down the sides. Okay, so I've scraped down my bowl, made sure that there's no flour, and if you look, you'll see that we have now a nice, light, fluffy batter. Tip us up and show you. It's very creamy, it's very soft. You're going to be spooning this into our press, so it almost looks like a waffle or pancake batter, and you can see the nice flecks of anise seed in there. I'm just going to scrape down our spatula and then remove it. Great thing about using the stand mixer is we can just keep the bowl for making the pizzelles. If you're not going to start using your iron right away, what you can do is you can put a piece of plastic wrap tightly over the top of this and pop it in the fridge. That's not going to hurt it to sit, but you just do want to give it a good stir when you take it out of the fridge, because the sugar will settle to the bottom. And even, we're going to cook this right now, but even in the process of cooking this much pizzelle, we'll stir it a few times as we go, just to make sure that nothing settles out into the bottom of our bowl. Okay, so we're ready to start pressing our pizzelles. I'm going to plug in our pizzelle machine and let it get nice and hot. You do want to spray it, just for the first pizzelle you make, you want to spray it with some non-stick cooking spray. I just have a plain butter flavored one. Spray all 4 of your trays, and then you want to let it close and get hot. Mine has an adjustable setting on here. It just can choose how dark you want your pizzelle to come out. I always just put it on 3. I don't really go by this, I go by time. And you can always open it and check until you really get used to your machine. Every machine is going to be different in how it cooks the pizzelles. So once the machine is hot, we'll go ahead and we'll start scooping some of our batter in. Okay, now our press is nice and hot. So what we're going to go ahead and do is take a scoop. You can use a cookie scoop or even a small cupcake scoop for this. I just have a little, like 1/8 of a cup scoop that I'm going to use today. But you can even just use two large spoons, which sometimes I do too. So you're just going to scoop up some of your batter, and then go ahead and put a nice dollop in the center of each one of your trays. And you're going to go ahead and close it. You can hear it pressing down. If it comes out the side, it's no big deal. Next time, just use a little bit less. That does happen. You have to, really get used to the amount that you need to scoop in there. But I'm going to do this first one for about 40 seconds, and then we'll check it to see how done it is. So we'll let our timer go. And there's really nothing you have to do while you do this. Like I said, my mom runs 2 presses at once, so she has it, coordinated so that she's not just standing here. She's always taking pizzelles in and out. But for most people, I think 1 press is about as much as you're going to want to handle at a time. So, you can sort of sit and relax while it's cooking. There's really nothing to do while it's getting ready. Okay, so our timer just went off. We're going to go ahead and open the pizzelle press, and you can see we've got 2 nice brown pizzelles. I put way too much batter in, so we're just going to cut those out. And don't worry if there's excess right now, we'll trim that off once they dry. When they first come out, you can see, I'll let this one hang down, they're very floppy. So that's why we put them here on the drying rack. It only will take a few seconds and they'll firm up, and I'll show you what that looks like once they're firm. So while those dry, I just go ahead and I continue scooping and putting them on the rack as I go. Okay, so our pizzelles are trimmed. We've gone ahead and we've done a couple of batches, and Linda trimmed them off. So this is what they look like. They are round, they're really thin and flat. And now, as you see, they've become hard from sitting here on the tray and cooling a little bit. They're not completely cool, they're still pretty warm. So what you're gonna do as they cool, these were the first ones we did, so these are a little bit cooler. And as they cool, we just move them over onto a a baking sheet to finish cooling. And we'll go ahead and we'll make the entire batch, moving them all onto the baking sheets. Depending on how many you're making, you're going to need several baking sheets. And then once they're all cooked, we'll go ahead and we'll put the powdered sugar and they'll be all ready to eat. Okay, so our pizzelles are all pressed. It's taken us several hours, but as you can see here, we have a huge pile of pizzelles, more than enough to last. And I'm going to give some away. It's way too many for just our family. And then I also did 2 cannoli style shells for you. Generally, you know, a traditional cannoli is a fried shell, but you can use this as a cannoli. What I did is when the pizzelle was soft out of the press, I just wrapped it around the handle of my wooden spoon, and you can see you've got a tube for cannoli. You can also make it into the shape of a waffle cone if you'd like. So I just did 2 of those just to show you how that works. So what I'm just going to do now, one of the traditional ways to eat these is covered with powdered sugar. So what I do is I just put a little bit of confectioner's sugar in my sifter. And again, you can leave this off. My preference is not to put the powdered sugar on, but my mom loves the powdered sugar. So you just take it and you dust your piles, and I'll just dust half of them, depending on, you know, how much you can dust down the pile. Okay, and there you have it. So that's what it looks like when it's covered in powdered sugar. It gives it a little more fancy of a taste, of a look and taste. I like them plain. Either way, they're really delicious. So I hope you are encouraged to try this recipe. It is time consuming, but it is very easy. The result is far superior to anything that you could buy in a store. If you have ever tasted a store pizzelle, if you try these and you make these, you will never eat that again. I mean, these are just a million times better. So I hope you try it and I hope you enjoy it.